This is a Gigabyte A520M DS3H A520 AM4 socket Ryzen 3rd gen ready, but I think it's probably had its BIOS updated for this motherboard, and there's no particular purpose to this video other than me checking that all the bits that have got work. So I got a Ryzen 5 2600X from cexwebuy.com for £25 and £3 postage. That's the chip. And this seemed like a good level of performance for the price, a nice sort of sweet spot, if you will. And it should go in here. Hopefully I've got that the right way around. And again, probably not. Okay, so there's a triangle in that corner. So is it this way around? There's a triangle in this corner as well. Okay, so there's a square, so it should line up here, and it's gone in relatively easy. I also got some DDR4 RAM. This is an 8GB stick, 16 gig, 2 times 8GB. And this was £4 from CEX and was in the store, so I was able to pick that up without having to pay for postage. And then I also got some G-Skill Ripjaw V. This is a 4GB stick, and this was £1. Or is it 8? I think it's 4. But we'll soon find out. And I haven't tested this motherboard, this RAM. So yeah, I don't know if it works. I've got a Ryzen heatsink. These tend to bend. If you're not careful with these, and end up out of alignment, but should be fine. And I'll get some thermal paste. Just gonna put some MX4 thermal paste on. Should be fine. Oh, and I've managed to lose the back plate. I think it's designed to go this way around. Okay, I've got a Corsair CX500 power supply. That should be plenty for this system. And the CPU connector, 8-pin connection over here. And then connect some other things, graphics card. And then start connecting cables. Okay, so switching the power supply on. Nothing happening. Pretty standard. Let's find the little power switch to switch this on. That's switched on. Fan is spinning. Is it going to post, and are there any LEDs on the motherboard? It doesn't look like it, which is a shame because motherboard LEDs are useful. I've plugged in a regular keyboard to see if anything happens. So it lights up when I switch the power supply on, and then doesn't seem to do anything when it actually switches on. So let's try the just one stick of RAM. There's just one stick of RAM in the system. Not looking good. Onto a third stick of RAM that I know works, and it's not working. So could be the motherboard, could be the processor, could be this graphics card, could be the cable. Pretty sure this graphics card works. Pretty sure the RAM works. I know the power supply works. I know this monitor works, and I think it's worked with that cable before. So let me just double check that cable and the monitor. I've got another Ryzen system, but it's my main PC, and I don't really want to start taking that apart for swapping parts out and troubleshooting. Yeah, this monitor and that cable works, so monitor cable fine. Was worth checking that just to make sure, but cable in the monitor is not a problem. I've just put a fresh CMOS battery in. Let me see if that makes any difference. Assuming this is actually switched on. Nope. No lights on the keyboard. I need to find a PC speaker buzzer, connect that up, see if that tells me anything. I've hooked up a speaker and a power switch. The switch is on. Should be getting some beeps in theory, but we're not. Just try that one more time. I've tried 3 different graphics cards now. Pretty sure all of these graphics cards work. Memory works. Thing I don't know is whether the processor or the motherboard is faulty here. I've changed the CMOS battery. I might have to try my processor in here, or try this processor in my main PC. Again, I don't really want to do that. It's all nicely set up. I suppose I could test this memory in my system quite easily. DDR4 system, so that'd be quite easy to just make sure all this memory works, but I'm pretty sure that it does. I think what's most annoying about this is that I've spent money on this, and the potential is that if this motherboard doesn't work, then I've spent money for nothing. So yeah. And here's how much power it's using, about 40 watts. So that seems about right for a system with just the processor running. But it's odd that it's not posting. The power light is coming on. Not sure if I showed that before. I've tried this with VGA and HDMI and not getting anything. At one point the digital on this said it was in power save mode. Don't know if that means anything or anything useful anyway. But yeah, not getting anywhere. So I've put the CPU in my main system and it's now posting. This is the processor Ryzen 5 2600X, so it's working. Temperature in the corner is fine. So looking like a bad motherboard. I've also checked this little graphics card works, and it works fine in this system. So yeah, while I'm doing this, I'll just check all the other DDR4 RAM works in this system, just to double check that's all working correctly. Okay, so we know this RAM works, we know the processor works, we know this graphics card works, we know the HDMI cable works, and that monitor works, and my other monitor works, but there's nothing coming out of this system. So the power LED is on. I hold the power button, it does switch off, but what you'll notice, I guess, is when it's switched on, that is fairly quiet, but then it ramps up to full speed. So I think the motherboard is in some kind of fault state, so it just puts the fan on maximum to try and protect whatever's going on. It is using 42 watts at the wall, but I think this motherboard is dead, non-functioning. Like I say, we know everything else works in my system. This graphics card, this RAM, this processor, etc. So I've ended up with a faulty motherboard. So to build a system around all these other parts, I'm going to need to find another motherboard. So this motherboard has a feature where apparently it will support the ability to update the BIOS even without a CPU or RAM or graphics card. So I'm going to try that. I think what I've done is I've got a motherboard that supports Ryzen 3000 and newer, but doesn't support the 2000 series or older. Whereas my motherboard, an X570, worked with the X2 600 CPU. This motherboard, I don't think is going to work with it. But according to the website, it should be possible to get into the BIOS flash mode without RAM, without graphics card, and without the processor. So that's what we're going to try and do now. I guess even though you can use the QFlash utility to flash the BIOS from a USB doesn't mean that it's going to give you a graphical display of the progress, perhaps. Maybe it just does it without doing anything particular. Either way, I've basically got the wrong processor for this motherboard. For some reason, I assumed that AM4 systems would be backwards compatible with earlier processors. Seems not. And you know what they say about assume? It makes an ass out of you and me. Anyway, I'm going to have to go find a processor for this system.